It's Grottu October 6, 2020. This is a special tribute video to the comic Crypt of Castle Hills. 2 people entered my contest. I've done a partial video for Metarog. I'll do more later. This is my video for comic Crypt of Castle Hills, where I will tell you how amazing his channel is, and I will give you memories of the wonderful city where that crypt is. A few years back, started watching YouTube and discovered all of these channels where people are relatively my age and have the same memories of comics and horror and monsters and rock and roll, and I started subscribing to them and watching them, and then this became more interesting than any regular television, and especially when my wife was out of town for a good while helping out her family after a devastating hurricane that happened a couple years ago. I spent a lot of time, and I discovered Captain Strangelove out of Chicago, and Silver Age Dave out of Ohio, and Metarog, and I'm not sure where he's at. I think he's in Florida, I'm not sure, and comic Crypt of Castle Hills. Castle Hills is a neighborhood in San Antonio. Now, have a lot in common with that Crypt Keeper in San Antonio. As I said in the last video, I live in a neighborhood called Carriage Hills, or Carriage Hill. Is it Carriage Hills? Doesn't matter. Carriage Hills. He lives in Castle Hills. Now, there seems to be a lot of royalty kind of stuff there in San Antonio, because Carriage Hills, and when I lived in San Antonio, I went to an elementary school, Regency place, and Regency and castles, and well, the thing about San Antonio, that was my mother's hometown, and my mother's family was part of the, what do they call them, the old 300 or the old 500? I don't know, it's been a while since I had Texas history. But the first families that came to Texas, my mother's family's part of that. They were the McCarley family. And when the Battle of San Jacinto happened, the night before the Battle of San Jacinto, the Texan soldiers camped on the McCarley farm. I gotta turn this other light on. And that was my great something or other. And there's a historical marker there. But yeah, this McCarley family. And somehow that McCarley family is related to the Robert E. Lee family. At least that's what I was always told. I can't find the exact connection, but I know I have an ancestor named Lily Lee, and they used to put her in the parades and around town, whatever. So Robert E. Lee, despite I know they've been tearing down his statues and everything, was actually a very good man. And he was against slavery, and he was a great general, and he was really respected by both sides. And he was a good guy. But so that may be part of why I have this attraction, because I'm kind of wanting, now that I've retired a few months ago, I have this desire to move to that part of the country, to Virginia or West Virginia, and it's just like, I don't know, it's so beautiful there, and it's something drawing me there, even though they have this crazy freaking governor there now. And just right now, with all that's going on in the world, I just like to move to someplace rural that's beautiful, that has, Blue Ridge Mountains, that kind of I just kind of like to, in a place where the property tax is like under, $500 a year or something like that, as opposed to over $4,000, which is what I'm looking at getting a bill any day now for. So all of this collection around you is going to have to be transported somewhere. So if you own a moving company and you like this channel, maybe you could give Grottu a bargain rate. Oh well. So San Antonio. I'm born there. Well, my mother's family's there, right? She went to Jefferson High School. I don't think that's a nice part of town anymore. It was apparently nice then. So, as a young lady, she meets my father, who's there in San Antonio training. My father joined. My father was drafted into the Army for the Korean War the day he graduated college. And anyway, they met. My mother was a school teacher. They married. She stopped being a school teacher, became a housewife. They had 2 kids. 10 years later, they have me. I don't think I was planned too much. So I have 2 older brothers. By the time I'm like in 4th grade, both of them are off to college. One's off by left before 2nd grade, and the other one was off to college 4th grade. So some of my childhood, I was an only child, and so about age 4, we moved to Germany. We stayed there for a few years. I started getting interested in monster stuff and Harvey, Casper, hot stuff, that kind of thing. And I start noticing the monster magazines. I start noticing Mad and Cracked and get really interested in that and Dennis the Menace. Then we move in the summer of '72 to Hampton, Virginia. That was the year I lived in Virginia, and that's part of my attraction to go back there. And that's when I really start to discover the Monster Times and Castle of Frankenstein, and I really get this monster bug hard. And the Three Stooges and Dennis the Menace, really strong Dennis the Menace fixation. And I'm reading the Marvel Werewolf by Night and Tomb of Dracula and all that. And then we moved to San Antonio, which is my mom's birthplace. It's my birthplace. And there I enter Regency Place Elementary. And I meet some really good friends there that are also into comic books, and we made our own comic books. But at a certain point, I discover the Fantastic Four, and then I go back and start realizing all these other Marvel heroes are cool too. And I really get the bug. I joined FOOM, the Friends of Old Marvel. It's the Marvel fan club at the time. It was, I think, their 3rd attempt at having a fan club. They had the Merry Marvel Marching Society in the mid-'60s, and then they had Marvel Mania. And then FOOM, which was designed by Jim Stranko. Jim Stranko designed and put out and designed the first issues of FOOM and all the little fan club memorabilia you get. And he did that so that Marvel would give him free ads. He didn't take pay. He just I want like a page or a half page in every Marvel comic, a free ad for my stuff, my history of comics, or he was doing like I just saw a copy of it here. He was doing his own magazine. It's amazing how stuff just appears like near where you're at. Like this magazine he was putting out, right? I just ordered this a few months ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic, on mycomicshop.com, which is a great source if you don't already know. They're very quick in shipping, and they package really well. And anyway, that's free advertisement. And speaking of sponsors, this tribute to the comic Crypt of Castle Hills is sponsored by Fang. Drink it by the pint, type A and type O. Breakfast drink for vampires. What this was, I was at a garage sale. There was a Tang bottle, and someone had just stored peanuts in it or something, and the label was gone, but it still had the cool 1970s top. So I took a wacky package, I blew it up somehow on a color printer, and I glued it on here so I created a real object from a wacky package. I did it with a 3D. I did it with my 4D printer. I took a wacky package and turned it into reality. And I wish reality was like wacky packages, which is one of the things I also discovered while at Regency Place Elementary. I entered into this insane world of Norman Saunders and all these other people that created those wacky packages, which were little stickers that made fun of products at the time. And I discovered Star Trek and Lost in Space. Marvel Comics. It was just a 2-year period from 73 to 75 that was kind of like the Great Awakening, when I discovered everything that I'm still into, even rock and roll. And I discovered that because American Graffiti came out. One of my brothers bought the soundtrack to American Graffiti. He didn't have a phonograph. So I had my childhood phonograph. He gave it to me. He said, play this through and see if there are any skips on it, so I know if I have to return it to the store. Because by the 70s, when you bought records, oftentimes they were already skipping and screwed up when you bought them, because they were making them really cheap at that time. And so I played it through. It was amazing music. I'd never heard anything like it. And then the Monster Mash comes on the radio. They re-released the Monster Mash like 10, 12 years after it was a hit in the 60s. And I fall in love with that. And my brother buys me the 45. And then it's just like everything kept lining up. Young Frankenstein came out, and Kolchak the Night Stalker, and it's like there were so many cool things that happened in this 2-year span. The big Treasury editions came out, and I saw the Galactus trilogy and read that, and it's like it was incredible. And it just seemed to one thing after another in that time period, the Bronze Age of comics. It was just such a great time. And then I discover on the newsstand this magazine called National Lampoon. I didn't know what it was. I flipped through it, and that kind of started warping my mind. Well, anyway, summer of 75, we move again to Tacoma, Washington. And Tacoma is a beautiful place. And we lived in a big, beautiful old house, must have been 100 years old, which really meant for, I think, generals. My father was a full colonel, so I guess he was pretty high rank, but it was really like a mansion and on base. But the school was really awful, and and I missed my friends that I had met in San Antonio. And I often thought, well, what if we had just stayed in San Antonio and I'd lived there my whole life? My life would be obviously different. It's one of those things where you know, if you had made this decision, of course you can't make that decision when you're about to be in 5th grade where you're going to live. You kind of live wherever your parents live. But if I'd stayed there, and if I'd remained friends with those people that I knew in 3rd and 4th grade, and I would have known them on through high school, and I'm sure at some point I would have met the comic Crypt of Castle Hills, the Crypt Keeper. We didn't go to the same schools, but you know, in a city, you meet people that are into the same stuff. You know, the store owners say, hey, this other guy's really into the stuff. You need to meet him. But, you know, by now I would have met him. But now through YouTube, you can kind of meet other people and connect with other minds that are similar to yours. So anyway, so we go to Tacoma, and Tacoma, it's like beautiful. It's like, wow, this is going to be a great place. And then it starts raining, and you realize, okay, those are the 3 or 4 days during the year when the sun actually comes out during the summer, and I just happen to see those first. And then it rains, just rains and rains and rains. And it's like living in England, and everything's green and beautiful, beautiful Christmas trees everywhere. You can see a Mount Rainier from your front yard, and it's beautiful. But I start getting overweight because before I was always riding my bike in San Antonio, and I can't do that now because it's always raining. And I remember I had a friend there named Roland Perry, and I can't find him anywhere in social media. It's like he'd ceased to exist. And he kept telling me, you gotta buy these new X-Men comics. They're coming. It's like this. And I said, yeah. Because the X-Men were nothing in the 70s. It's like no one paid attention to them. Mego, when they made their dolls, which now they call action figures, but they were called dolls then. See, you can see them behind me. Isn't that cool how this times out? That's completely coincidental. When Mego made those dolls, they never made any X-Men. Because X-Men was, at that point, they kept publishing it. I think Stan Lee just decided he needed to keep publishing it, but it wasn't selling. It was actually all reruns. It was repeats. I'm petting my cat, sorry. And it was the weirdest thing. So these, he kept telling me I should get these X-Men comics. I should have listened to him, because at that time, those were the really important, super early key issues. But anyway, I didn't start buying them till we move again. We only lived in Tacoma 1 year, and then my dad retired. We moved to Arlington, Texas, because my oldest brother was going to school here. University of Texas in Arlington. And my dad had seen Arlington, liked it, so he decided to settle down here. So he retired from the Army, he got into real estate, and you know, I finished out school here, and I've been stuck here ever since. I've lived in Longview, in East Texas for 1 year, but pretty much I've been stuck here. And about early 2000s, go over to Dallas, the area that I go to all the time to buy records and antiques and cool magazines, and I got really badly mugged by a gentleman that, I mean, I've never been hit that hard in the face multiple times. And my glasses, I had thick glasses, they were broken, and then someone stopped to help me after the guy ran away. Got my wallet, it had $30 in it, but then that person that came to help me ran over my glasses, so I couldn't see it all because I was like horribly blind without glasses. I later got the laser surgery. So after that, I really didn't want to go to Dallas that much anymore. And a lot of my friends were in Dallas. And then I kind of became more of a recluse than ever, because I didn't want to go over there. It was just too dangerous. Didn't want to face, you know, go through that again, you know. So so whenever I'm looking at houses, you know, deciding to move what state, I'm always looking, what's the crime rate there, you know, and it's like, I find some towns, I found a town like, it was like Mayberry. They have one police officer. They have no crime, zero crime. I talked to someone from there. He says, well, yeah, we did have a kid steal a car a couple of years ago, went out on a joyride. Basically, it's Mayberry. I mean, there's no crime. There's no nothing. It's like moving back into a sitcom, moving back into the 50s. And I really want to move there or someplace equivalent to it. There are places in the United States where this shit isn't happening. And I don't want to be prey for this people that just want to, I don't know. That was a horrible experience, and so, you know, I feel like my wife wants to go out more, and I don't. I'm always kind of hesitant, and it's not a good thing. We gotta move to a place where it's safer. Anyway, so over the years, I meet new people. For a while, I was putting out my own little magazines. Nothing that elaborate. I showed you that in a previous video. But I've developed a collection of insane things. I know other people with insane collections, but oh, you got to look at. You guys got to look up Tesco V. He's a musician, a punk rock guy. He's like 65 now. But he's got the best collection I've ever seen of monster toys from the 60s and robots and spacemen kind of stuff. His whole basement is amazing. So go to YouTube, look up Tesco V monster toys, or just look up Tesco V. You'll find the tour of his basement. You gotta look at that. I just discovered that about a week ago. He's whenever you go to these Facebook monster toy sites, you'll always see some of his toys. San Antonio is a beautiful place. My earliest memory is a place called Dick's Hobby Shop. I have no idea where in San Antonio it was, but it was where my oldest brother went to get his toys, his trains. He was a model train collector, collected in-scale trains. And wherever that was, that's where I saw a display of the Aurora monster scenes. The torture chamber, and it was all built up and painted, probably at the factory. Blood everywhere, with the Dr. Deadly and the girl in the cage and Vampirella, and blood splattered everywhere and experiments going on. I saw that there. There was a great place called Frontier Burger. Charbroiled hamburgers, cheeseburgers, The only other place I ever had them that great was a place called Burger Chef, and that was in Virginia. But I've never seen burger chefs around in Texas, and they're long gone anyway. But Frontier Burger, it was made like an old fort. And I remember the graffiti in the restroom was elaborate, like not just fuck you. It was just long poetry, and it was perverse. And I remember asking, I don't know, my older brother, like, what does this word mean? I may have been asking him what fuck meant. I don't know, but there were words I saw there, but it was very literate filth. That was interesting. Anyway, Frontier Burger's long gone, but they still have all over San Antonio and Austin these great 50s architecture. Jim's Coffee Shop. They got this little cowboy Jim with a cowboy hat, and it's people think it's like Denny's, but it's so far beyond that. And they still serve the Frontier Burger in Jim's Coffee Shop because it's the same people. And now I see that Frontier Burger's been reopened in San Antonio. You know, and I've always been meaning to go back. I want to go back to San Antonio and see the home that I lived in 4th and 5th grade, where I had that awakening. Where this young Frankenstein poster here, that was on my wall as a child, along with my Wacky Packages poster that I ordered from the Tops company, and also what else? My Foom poster, and all that. And I had all my Mego dolls lined up. They're just back behind me. A lot of the stuff. Planet of the Apes, so I forgot. That was another huge obsession then. And they had these great 5 and dime stores, TG&Y and I think Wynn's. And then HEB was the greatest supermarket in the world. And apparently they are great people because they help out when there's disasters. They're always there helping out and donating. And HEB, but the HEB by where I lived is now a Walmart supermarket. You know, that's, you know, all the great stores are gone. And the little place called Lone Star Drive-In where I got the convenience store, where I got my first issue of the Warren Spirit and got a lot of the Atlas comics when they came out. And I think that's where I got my Treasury Edition #2 of Fantastic Four. You like seeing people cough into their hand during a pandemic. Joe Biden does it all the time. While he's criticizing the president. And I just heard Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, the beautiful press secretary that tears new assholes in the press every day. They just announced it 30 minutes ago that she's got the disease that cannot be named on YouTube. So that's horrible. It's almost a little like, was it a bioweapon? Was it made in a lab? Is this targeted? You can't say things like that on YouTube, you know. I've said too much. Anyway, so the world of San Antonio, the Alamo, the Riverwalk, Joski's was a place my mom always took me to. Big department store. I just have wonderful memories of all this shit. I remember when we first lived in San Antonio the first time, you know, my mom was always watching Dark Shadows and General Hospital, and I just have vague memories of my older brothers playing with Tonka trucks. Those were those big metal toys that, you know, you could kill someone with. I don't know if they make them anymore. And this is just, I have great memories of that time, of that place. Well, and my father designed the house that we lived in in 3rd and 4th grade. He was there. He went early, and it was, I guess, was there with the architect and designed and laid out everything where things should be in the house. And I've got the blueprints, and it's drawn out exactly where all the plants, they designed and landscaped the whole yard. I've got it all rolled up. And whoever owns that house now, I feel like they should have that. They may not even care. They may just toss that in the trash. Maybe I should keep it as a family keepsake, or I thought maybe it should go with a house. I don't know. But I always thought maybe I should contact the people that live there now, send them a letter. Would you like these plans for your house? I don't know. What good are they going to do me, I guess. But San Antonio, I got in touch with one of my old friends from 3rd and 4th grade. through Facebook a few years ago, and that was really weird after, what, 40 years to get back into contact with him. I remember being at his house, and there was a beat up old Spider-Man. It was the oldest one I'd ever seen. It was one of the Steve Ditko issues, and you'll probably be able to tell me, whoever's watching this, you'll be able to tell me down below what issue it was. I mean, I could find out pretty quick, but not right now because I'm using my phone as a camera. But I remember it had a picture, like a circle or a square up at the top, and it showed Aunt May on a hospital bed, and Spider-Man was fighting, but it had the little picture of Aunt May sick up at the top. So whatever issue that was, probably in the 40s, I don't know. But it was beat up, beat to hell. But it was like, wow. And then this kid, another kid, I think his name was Scott, had all these comics from the 50s that his mom had given him, curiously. And there was a G.I. Joe, not anything to do with the G.I. Joe of Hasbro, because this was from the 50s. I remember those had painted covers. I remember a G.I. Joe and maybe a Captain Marvel. And then this other friend, oh, that was the oldest thing I ever saw, was a Silver Age X-Men. And then I traded well, Silver Age, maybe beginning of Bronze Age. I call it Silver Age X-Men from a friend, and that was the oldest comic I had at that time. In my early days of collecting was the X-Men, that I think it's a Neil Adams cover with Kazar or Kazar, depending on how you pronounce it. You know, is it Tarzan or Tarzan? It's up to whoever says it. But Kazar is up on a cliff looking down at the X-Men. I got that issue. That was my oldest issue. And it's just anything that had that corner box was a sacred object because it was old. It was from the 60s. In reality, it was 1974. The 60s were just 4 or 5 years in the past. In 1974, the first issue of Fantastic Four was just 12, 13 years before. 13 years ago now is nothing. You ever think about that? American Graffiti came out in 73? It was about 1962. That was 11 years before. But the world changed so damn much in those 11 years, it might as well have been about 100 years before. The cars and the music and everything. And I know a lot of the music in American Graffiti was really from the 50s, but you know, in 1962, you're not just going to listen to the music only of 1962. Just like today, you turn on the radio, you're going to hear songs from a few years ago. American Graffiti changed me. Oh, the other things that changed me musically is my oldest brother. That was my middle brother, the American Graffiti record, and that just kind of became absorbed in my record collection. He never took custody of it. He had me test it, and then it became mine. But my oldest brother would bring he had all these 8-track tapes, and he'd visit from college in his Ford Maverick, and he had the Beach Boys, Endless Summer, and all of these. And then I discovered that music, and I loved it. And when he had a Jim Croce tape, I loved that music. And then on the radio, the music that people now say, oh, that music of the 1970s was so shitty, or at least they used to. I think people have come around now. Imagine being in a car and hearing Top of the World by the Carpenters for the first time. It's a new record. It's the first time you've ever heard this song before in your life. And you're driving, I was driving with my middle brother in our family Ford, light blue Ford 1969 station wagon. And I'm hearing this Karen Carpenter sing this song. The first time you hear it, it's stuck in your head forever. The Carpenters. People make fun of it. They were freaking great. The music of the 70s, and now I even realize the music that I hated in the late 70s, the disco music, that wasn't that bad either. Then I hated Kiss when they first came out, and after a while I realized by 1990, I realized they were great. And I even have a Kiss pinball machine now. The 70s were a good time in a lot of ways. In the monster craze that started in the late 50s when, television didn't have many movies on it in the early days of television. And then Universal Films released a whole package of their horror movies to independent to TV stations packaged as shock theater, and so all these independent stations started airing shock theater, and they'd hire their own local horror host, man or woman, to host the movie. And then monsters became huge in the late 50s, and that's when Famous Monsters of Filmland started. And they were huge all through the 60s. This was a fad that didn't end quickly. And they were huge all through the 70s until Star Wars came out. And Star Wars in space took over. And I love Star Wars. I dearly love Star Wars. In those first 3 movies, or 2.5, because Return of the Jedi was a little disappointing, but I still love it. But unfortunately, what Star Wars did unintendedly was it just knocked the monsters off their pedestal. But they'd been there. They had a good over 15-year run. And in the early 70s, they were still making those monster toys. And the old monster toys were still kind of easily available on the secondhand market. Although my mom didn't like me buying used stuff. And that was one of the problems. My mom was always saying she didn't want me to buy used books, used magazines, used comic books. She was afraid they'd bring bugs into the house. She'd say there was something called book lice, and maybe there is, but I didn't even want to think about it. She didn't like. She was a child of the Depression. Buying used things was not was a negative, very horrible thing, a very low class thing. If I was, I remember being at I don't know, I guess I could research wherever the movie theater was that was in my part of San Antonio where Young Frankenstein played. It was kind of like a mall, but not quite. It was indoor shops. I remember it was a mall, probably torn down now. Whatever that place was, they had a guy set up with comic books. Boxes of comic books. I remember seeing Silver Surfer #1. None of them were bagged. I picked up Not Brand Ec there. They were so cheap, but relatively, because you didn't have as much money then. But if I was only able to buy used comics in the early 70s, I could have a pretty world-class collection now. And now what I'm facing is I started this story in another video and I never finished it. I'm watching some of these younger collectors now, and they're talking about the Key Collector app. I downloaded that to see what this is all about. And it's like a lot of these I was talking to you earlier about the Fantastic Four Fantastic Four comics are almost all key issues. And but other comics, they have key issues. These are the ones that some people check their app. Is this a key issue? And then they want to buy it. So The Incredible Hulk 181 is a key issue. They need to get that, or 180, because Wolverine appears in them for the first time. But if you were to offer them Hulk 178, no, I don't want that. That's a sign of someone that's buying comics, I think, for the wrong reason. They're just buying it because this is a key issue. I want key issues only. And there's a guy, and he's a nice guy on YouTube, but it drives me crazy. What he's doing right now is he collects and buys and resells comics, but he only wants to have 500 comics in his collection. I don't know how he reached that number. 500, I think that's less than 2 long boxes. So what he's doing, and every so often he'll have a video. Okay, I'm going through the H's, and I'm narrowing down the H's to the comics that I'm going to keep. Then he decides based on how cool their covers are, or whatever reason. But he only wants, so he's trying to keep the very best. What are the very best comics in my collection? The top, maybe the condition, the very best of 500 comics. And I'm thinking, well, gosh, and maybe he lives in one of these little tiny houses that they want. You know how they want you to live in these tiny houses, trying to make it cool on all these YouTube videos. People have moved into a train car and fixed it up really nice, or they live in some house that's off the grid and it only has like 200 square feet in the house. And so I guess if that was the case, maybe you could only have 1 box of comics and you'd have to, but I don't know. To me, it's like Sophie's Choice, the ending of Sophie's Choice. I don't want to ruin that movie for you. If you haven't seen Sophie's Choice, fast forward 30 seconds. But it's not a movie you're ever gonna watch. Let's face it. But anyway, you know, she's kind of fucked up, Sophie, in this movie. And then at the end, you see why she's kind of fucked up and strange, is that she had to make this decision as a young mother during the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. She had two babies, and the soldiers said you can only keep one of the babies, and so she had to decide which baby she was going to keep, and that was her choice. And it's a fucked up EC Comics horror kind of decision. You could realize, anyway, Meryl Streep movie. But to me, having to choose between my comics is like that Sophie's Choice Meryl Streep moment. So watching those videos makes me nervous. The guy that does those is a nice guy, and I'm not knocking you if you see this. I doubt you'll see this because I get 30 people watching any given video. I've got 91 subscribers. I had 92. I think somebody got upset because I said I like Donald Trump, so they and a lot of the subscribers, actually the last, I don't know, what was I, in the 50s? And I think it was through Comic Crypt of Castle Hills and Metarog. Those two mentioning me have brought me a lot of subscribers, and I hope they actually watch the videos, you know. But if I can get more subscribers, and when I figured out, I think I can go live on here. I think, you know, you need 1,000 subscribers to go live with your telephone, with your freaking cell phone. But if you use your laptop, you can go live even with my measly 91 subscribers. And I was wanting to do a live video, and so I'm gonna have to experiment with that, because I could be just doing this live. But then, if I slip and say a horrible curse word, I wouldn't be able to edit it. I also got to learn how to edit these videos. That's another problem, because that seems to be something people like, is the snappy editing. Oh, the Key Collector app. It's kind of cool. It's so these people that young people that it used to take you decades of research and collecting and living life to have this comic book knowledge, and now it's all there in your phone, and you know everything, and you know how this issue is trending this week, that this issue is trending because now they're making a Fantastic Four movie, so the first appearance of Silver Surfer and this one is trending because Chadwick Boseman passed away, and it's like they have it all updated. I don't know. Does it take the fun out of things? I did think what was cool on the Comic Collector app is they had Liechtenstein, a thing where you click on Liechtenstein and it shows you comics where Liechtenstein stole the panels that he made millions of dollars with. If you don't know who Roy Lichtenstein is, he put, the pop art movement in the 60s. He'd paint giant canvases based on a comic book panel, and he'd paint the dots giant, the dots that made up the color in a comic book, and he just stole the art, and the original artist that drew those panels wasn't compensated. But anyway, in that Key Collector app, they show the panel from the original comic and the Liechtenstein ripoff, and then the issue, and so you can, if you wanted to track down the Liechtenstein comics, the ones he stole from, you could, and that's cool. Although the comic book price guide, the Overstreet one, is always listed Liechtenstein, but it's on your phone. It's kind of cool if you're in a comic store. You can just look at it, and it comes up right on your phone. Because, carrying a comic book price guide into a comic store, you kind of look like an asshole. So, other memories of San Antonio. I remember that I thought that Warren magazines had terrible distribution there, because I only saw like an issue. The whole time I was there, I only saw like an issue of Erie once in some supermarket, and I saw the first issue of Spirit and the second issue of Spirit in some weird Lone Star drive-in place. But I thought, well, Famous Monsters is just doesn't have good distribution in San Antonio. No, but it was just that they weren't distributed in the stores around where I lived. And as a third or fourth grader, I only know the stores that my mom goes to. So yeah, they weren't at HEB, they weren't at Stop and Go or Mr. M. But yeah, one time I went to the dentist downtown San Antonio, and there was a bookstore there. And I remember I got the Famous Monsters issue where Sinbad's fighting the skeleton with swords there, and so they were there. The Marvel stuff was well distributed everywhere I went. I found all the Marvel monster magazines, Monsters Unleashed and Vampire Tales and Dracula Lives. Those were all easy to find in San Antonio. What was harder to find were those Eerie publications, the not Creep, not Eerie magazine from Warren. There was Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella, but there was another company called Eerie Publications that put out the really lurid covers with blood squirting everywhere, and then the insides were redrawn or 50s comics drawn with more blood. Those were hard to find, and I remember a friend found one, and he was like the cool guy at school because he had this, and it was like, oh my god, what is that? It's like a war atrocity. He's holding up a picture or something of something horrible. Because it was really shocking to see that as a kid, something that blatantly horrible that existed. It was like when Larry Flint, I think in Hustler in the 70s, he was against the war, so he actually published a picture of someone that was shot in the face. That was, and the eyes were like way over, on sides of the head because the whole skull had separated. And it's something horrifying like that. The first time you see something like that, how horrifying it is. And that's what Eerie Publications were. And to a certain extent, the Jack Chick tracks that another friend brought from his church were pretty horrifying too. Just that I showed you those a few days ago. Those were kind of shocking. They were religious, but they were scary and creepy and dark and scratchy artwork, but it was beautiful artwork, but it was just something not right about it. It just didn't have the feeling of the drawings you'd see in a Sunday school book or illustrated book of the Bible that I grew up with that showed beautiful blonde-haired angels with wings. Those Jack Chick tracks made it seem very skeevy, and it made religion seem scary. And so that kid would sell those comics that he got from his church there on the, like he was selling like he was selling I don't know, crack or something. Everything about all my memories of San Antonio are wonderful. Is it as good as I remember? Probably not. I mean, I hear there's bad crime there. Here it's a big heavy metal town now. Heavy metal didn't even exist then. I think right when I was leaving San Antonio to go to Tacoma, that's when the band Kiss was starting to be. I mean, I remember hearing the name, but I don't remember if I was hearing the name of the band Kiss. I know there was also a radio station there in San Antonio called Kiss. So I know that Kiss was in my head, and I saw Kiss around the word Kiss, but I don't know if it was the early albums coming out, because I don't really think Kiss became a big thing until like when I was in 6th, 7th grade. And one of the people I went to junior high with here in Arlington went on to be in the hell was that band? Well, this guy was a huge Kiss fan in junior high. I mean, huge. And he kind of looked like, in the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, he kind of looked like Fat Freddy. But he was this heavy metal guy. And he was later in, what was the band he was in? It's a pretty big band. But later he was in Gwar. And I think he was in Ministry for a while, but he was in, what the frick was that? Rigor Mortis. Yeah, he was in the band Rigor Mortis. It's a guy that I know from, and I saw him at the Dallas Fantasy Fair, and he said, "Hey, Kenneth." So, trying to think other memories of San Antonio. The Alamo was beautiful. My uncle Guy um, lived in San Antonio. He'd flown bombers in World War II, and he lived in San Antonio all his life. He was the brother of my mom, and he was a neat guy. He looked just like a lot like Don Knotts, and had the personality of Don Knotts, but he was really profane. Imagine Don Knotts mixed with George Carlin, because just he cursed a lot. He never said the F word that I heard, but all the old-fashioned, the words that the old-timers used, lots of goddams and that kind of thing. But he would tell hilarious stories, and I remember he couldn't hear. Well, because of the flying in World War II, he lost a lot of hearing. And I remember he was an air traffic controller there in his later years, but he lost a lot of hearing. So if we went in a restaurant, when you are going deaf, the first thing that you can't hear are the voices of young girls. So when a waitress would come to wait on us in the restaurant, he couldn't hear them at all. It was like their lips were moving, but he could hear everyone else. But it's a little too high pitched for him to hear. He was a great guy. He passed away. But yeah, he was a funny guy, Uncle Guy. And I never met my grandmother on that side. But yeah, oh, there was all this. Oh yeah, he had a river house in Seguin, or near Seguin, and I remember it flooded, and it must have flooded in the '60s. And I remember going into that house, and you could still see the watermark where the water had gotten to, and there were a lot of family photos that had to be kind of separated, and they had mud on them. And I just have a lot of memories, of that time. And I have a lot of time to think about things now during the pandemic, and now I'm thinking about trying to get things organized and thinking about putting the house on the market, and we're looking at other houses. And yeah, life is just a little confusing right now. And and hearing all this stuff about the president and everything, and well, we'll see how it all turns out. I'm starting to get, and then the other, all this shit, old age shit. My right eye. I'm driving along a couple months ago, and all of a sudden, it's like I see all this stuff in my line of a blood vessel had broken in my eye, and now it's still a little floater. I'll kind of see a little floater in my right eye. I kind of feel like, fuck it, I'll just put an eye patch on like Nick Fury. It'll look cool. But this, like I'm driving at night, and it's like this little gray floater. Like I'll see it there. I just see it moving just now like that, and it's like, is there a cat going across the road? And it's like, no. It's like and I'm lighting. I should show you how I got this set up. See, I've got this 50s light here. And then I got these two 50s fluorescent desk lights lighting me up here, and it's really hard on my eyes. So that's why I'm starting to get distracted. It's like, oh my gosh, I should wear sunglasses while I do these videos, but I look like an asshole, I think. And I probably look like I have one shirt, but in reality, what happened is they were selling these shirts at Target a few years ago. And every time we'd go in Target, I'd throw another one or two in the basket. And my wife thought I was crazy, and I must have bought about 10 of these Batman shirts because I just thought it was so cool. Although I hate that they make it look distressed and faded. I wish it was just bright and like it was new. But I thought, well, this is incredible. You got the '66 Batman logo on a shirt, and it's like less than $10. I just kept tossing them in the basket just because What if I buy one and it wears out? I gotta have more. So every time I reach in the closet, I pull out one of these blue shirts, and it's another Batman shirt. And so, yeah, I'm probably starting to look like the cast of Gilligan's Island on these YouTube videos. You know, Gilligan always had his red shirt. You know, the skipper always had his blue shirt, and I'm always wearing this Batman shirt. Well, um, the comic Crypt of Castle Hills was the subject of this. Uh, Almost, you could just tick off everything. And the last few videos, he's got a Star Trek poster behind him. I have that Star Trek poster kind of rolled up in the closet in there. That was on my childhood wall. It's like a collage of Star Trek pictures. I got that at Helen Gallagher's at the Forum Mall, probably about 1977. Helen Gallagher's is kind of like Spencer's, except much better. It was a local Spencer's kind of place. So I had that same Star Trek poster on my wall, and he has all the same influences. Just seems like the greatest guy in the world. The thing about it, my mom kind of robbed me of the G.I. Joe experience, the 70s G.I. Joe experience, because I got a talking G.I. Joe when I was sick in the hospital. Like, you know, I was like Donald Trump. I actually went to the hospital one day, and they said, well, we need to keep him there. It's like, I'm 5 or 6, and they say, I thought, we'll go to the hospital, I'm sick. I expect, okay, I'm going to leave with my parents, but no, they keep me there, and my parents leave without me, and I stayed in the hospital. And so my parents I guess they went to the PX and got me some toys and brought them to me. But the PX must have had old toys, because they got me this talking G.I. Joe, and that was not from 1971 or whenever I was in the hospital. It must have sat on the shelf for a couple of years. It's like the Walgreens near me has Batman toys from, I think, 5 years ago, from some shitty Batman cartoon where the Joker looks like some rave party idiot. But they're still there, and they must have gotten an old G.I. Joe. Maybe it was on clearance, but you pulled its dog tags, and it talked, and it said, enemy planes, hit the beach, and all that shit. And it was, it doesn't talk anymore, but I still have that in the box in the other room. And I think they got me some Hasbro Kooky Spookies, the little finger puppet that glows like fucking uranium, because whatever they made that out of, it glows and lights up a room, and it's probably extremely radioactive, because toys don't glow like that anymore. Anyway, so G.I. Joe, and my older brothers had G.I. Joes. They didn't come down to me, though. But to me, G.I. Joe was a war toy. And then when those G.I. Joe Adventure Team guys came out, my mom explained to me that a bunch of people had complained, because I guess she read in Ladies' Home Journal or McCall's, a bunch of moms and teachers were complaining about these war toys. So Hasbro decided, well, we won't make G.I. Joe a soldier anymore. We'll let his hair grow out, and he'll have a beard, and he'll be an adventurer. He'll be this guy that goes out and looks for mummies' tombs, and Bigfoot, and all that, or the abominable snowman, or whatever. And so she explained that to me, that G.I. Joe had been neutered. And that made me like, oh, I don't want that G.I. Joe. So she ruined it. It was almost like she told me Santa Claus didn't exist or anything. She told me that Hasbro had been, cucked by the PTAs of the women of the world. I would never use the word Karens. I hate when people use Karen to... Oh, by the way, see behind me, this is a TV ad for the Whammo giant comic book. It was a giant comic book. I've never seen one in person. But Night Tiger Comics, I don't know if you watch me, but one time, I think it was you were like showing G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe had ads on television that were advertised the Marvel comic, and he was saying, this is the first time a comic book was advertised on television. And I was thinking, he may be right. And then I thought, well, no, I've seen that on YouTube. So that, I think, actually may be the first television comic book ad for there. You can get it off YouTube. I'm watching a bunch of Whammo toy toy commercials. Um, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just pointing out something. Night Tiger's a cool guy that follows my Instagram. You guys ought to follow my Instagram. I have 10,000 pictures there, and I know Charlton66 is there, and I've seen Night Tiger there, and just look up Grottu Orloff. There's not a lot of Grottu Orloffs, or there better not be. Orloff is a family name. Grottu I just took from a Marvel monster, a giant ant, and those old, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko monster comics of the 50s. And yeah, that Grottu's name is really owned by Marvel. If someone was to say, you can't use that name, I just call myself Dr. Orloff or Professor Orloff. Because Orloff, I didn't steal that from those Dr. Orloff and his Temple of Death type movies. That was actually an ancestral family name. I mentioned that in some video I was yammering about earlier. I had a point I was making. I lost my train of thought. I spent 25 years in the classroom. I'm used to talking and talking and talking, and now I don't have anyone to talk to except the cat. So I'm using YouTube as kind of my surrogate classroom. And I can teach you a lot about comics and things. I know a lot of shit. But there's a lot of stuff that you guys can teach me because I don't know a lot about the modern comic collecting. I don't know what to look for in the modern comic world. And I don't know that I can afford to get into that. But let's just, what I wish could happen. Oh, I was talking about Night Tiger Comics. Oh yeah, so follow my Instagram. I got over 10,000 pictures there. Night Tiger, yeah, a lot of cool people on there. If you have an Instagram, let me know about it so I can follow it. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos. I'm going to go through my records. I'll just, show off different stuff. But please follow the comic Crypt of Castle Hills. I mean, he's right tuned in to the same world, the same kind of frequency that I am. I'm thinking about moving. I wish that everybody, because most of the people I follow are kind of in the same age bracket as me, 40s. I'm in my mid 50s and 60s. I wish all those people that I follow could all retire and we could all find some community somewhere to move to, like some Shangri-La, some place in some beautiful little town where there is no crime, and we could all move there, and we could establish a utopia comic book monster community, and we could start a museum. There's a town I was looking at called Wheeling, West Virginia. Ooh, it's a beautiful town with cool Victorian architecture. They've got a toy museum there that's amazing. It's in an old school. But find some town and just take it over, and make it Aurora. Call it Aurora. We'll name it after we'll change the name of the town. We'll take over the city council. We'll change the name of the town. We'll make it a monster community. We'll have our own radio station and play good music, and we will take over and just have a little pocket of coolness where Cardi B doesn't exist. And I wish that could happen. I know it's not going to happen, but I'm going to try to start it. So wherever I move to, I hope some of you, if you're wanting to get the hell away from the crime and the, because honestly, not to be depressing, but regardless of who wins the election, there's going to be chaos in the streets, more so in certain cities than others. I mean, people are going to flip out if Trump wins. People are going to flip out if, I keep wanting to call him Biden. if Biden wins. Either way, um, it's going to be bad. Um, so, um, the world, I wish the world was still the way it was when I was third, fourth grade, or at least the way I thought it was. Maybe things were horrible, but in my little community, right around that, I guess I was in the north, maybe northwest part of San Antonio. I don't even know where I was living. I think there was an airport near me. Regency Place Elementary, it's still there, so you could kind of track where that area is. I could get on my bike, ride miles, go to the store. There was no danger, no sense of danger, no sense of horror. Um, but Comic Crypt of Castle Hills, subscribe to that channel. You won't believe the incredibleness that you'll see. I hear my dog whining downstairs, so I need to go see what's up with her. And I will see you in a few hours. Take care.